When I first booted up The Last of Us Part 2, for some reason, maybe because I hate myself, I intentionally selected the hardest difficulty possible for the game, the aptly named grounded level difficulty. A lot of games nowadays usually do have some kind of ultra hard mode difficulty, but it's usually locked at the beginning for new players and only available after you beat the game, so you can start a new Game Plus file and use all your previous guns and resources and abilities. What I didn't realize at the time was that the grounded level difficulty was definitely meant to be played on a new Game Plus file where you would have all those resources, because yes, it was terribly difficult. I remember the game even had a warning message before I started playing, almost pleading with me to not do this. They said playing the game on this difficulty right out of the gate was almost virtually guaranteeing I would have a bad time. It would be too hard, too brutal, and too difficult. I've actually never even seen that kind of warning before, or since. A game advising you to not do that. Don't play that way. So, after I finally rolled the credits on the grounded save file, I knew the game was never meant to be played with that level of difficulty. To say it was incredibly difficult would be an understatement. I died hundreds of times. I got straight up stuck on standard enemy encounters dozens of times. It was one of the most challenging gaming experiences I've ever had in my entire life, before or since. But honestly, it was also one of the most fun gaming experiences I've ever had in my entire life, also before or since. Now, why is that? Looking back at it all now, I think it's because never before had my role in a video game world felt so real. The Last of Us Part 2 is a game about surviving in a post-apocalyptic zombie outbreak world, and one can imagine that in real life, living in a world like that would be an unspeakably difficult experience. Survival would be both paramount and nearly impossible, and playing the game on that difficulty, well, it just made the entire scenario feel less like a video game and more like a simulation of real life, or at least like what I imagine real life would be in that kind of world. And before I forget, I make a lot of videos like this, so if you want to see more of them, be sure to click that subscribe button. So here's the thing about video games. If you think about even the most well-reviewed, most immersive video games ever made, it only takes a few seconds before you start to see how it's really just a video game and nothing like real life. For instance, any games involving guns, there's always tons of ammo boxes littered around the world, perfectly at your eye level, always with the exact right type of bullet for the specific gun you happen to be using at that moment. There are bright, shining health packs and resources planted at the most optimal places and times when you most need them. The path forward is practically a yellow brick road where you almost never get lost. This is video games. Video games are meant to be fun, removing the most boring and awkward and time-consuming parts of real life, because real life is often not fun. The Persona series somehow makes taking a test in high school seem really fun, because that section of the game only lasts like a minute or two. It only contains the most fun interactions between you and your closest friends. It has a short quiz that measurably boosts your most useful stats, and it gives you the ability to leave the situation whenever you want. Real life high school is not like that. If you try to simulate real life high school in a video game, the developers of that game would probably go bankrupt immediately after launch, because no sane person would want to play through the terribly boring, awkward, difficult, anxiety-ridden hellscape that high school in real life really is. Normally, any video game that tries to apply real-life logic to video games ends up in the same camp. It's awkward, it's obtuse, and it's just so boring. But playing The Last of Us Part 2 on grounded difficulty on my first playthrough quickly became something more than just a video game experience. It was essentially an apocalypse simulator for me. There were so many instances where I realized that video games in real life just differed in almost every way, but in this specific playthrough, it became one of the most real life experiences in video games I've ever had. Here's what I mean. Let's say you were actually in the Last of Us world. The cordyceps virus has started killing off humanity entirely, turning much of them into terrifying, deadly monsters, runners, clickers, shamblers, or something far worse. Ugh. Humanity is driven to the breaking point. resulting in cannibalism and violence at every corner. It's every man and woman for themselves, with just a few communities left sprinkled across the world, still barely surviving. And even these communities are ruled by ruthless, authoritative governments that regulate every possible facet of your life because they have to. Otherwise, that small community would devolve into chaos and death. Now, imagine you were stranded in the middle of some zombie-infested city in this world. 20 years after the outbreak happened, the last remaining groups of human survivors have been picking through the city for literally decades, poking through every house, opening every drawer, and eating and collecting and scrounging up every single usable resource they can find. Do you think that after all that time you'd find a workable, clean, loaded gun just lying around on a bench somewhere? Do you think that upon picking up that gun, you'd consistently find a never-ending stream of working, reliable bullets that are an exact fit for your gun? How about first aid kits? Food. This is a world that has been so picked clean by the last remaining groups of truly desperate to the point of cannibalism gangs, you'd get eaten before you found such resources just lying around. And to Last of Us Part 2's credit, many humans in that world do meet that very fate. All this probably isn't a big surprise to you. You're like, look, hey buddy, relax, it's just a video game. Of course it's not real. I get it. But please listen to me when I say ungrounded difficulty, it did feel real to me. When I was playing ungrounded difficulty, every single tiny little resource, a 6-inch strip of clean cloth, 2 pistol bullets, an intact beer bottle, a quarter roll of duct tape, felt like I had stumbled upon a winning lottery ticket. In any given room in this game, there might be like 5 to 7 openable drawers that on lower difficulties would probably contain any number of resources for the player. But on Grounded, I'd have to scrounge through an entire building just to find a single bullet and a brick, and I consider myself lucky for finding it. My playthrough began shifting from an experience where I think, wow, this video game on Grounded difficulty is really tough, to thoughts more like someone who is actually in that world. Like, boy, I really hope I find a couple more bullets somewhere in the city because all I have to fend off the dozens of clickers skulking around the corner is an old plank of wood. I found myself thinking like how I imagine an apocalypse survivor would. Sometimes I would just skip searching areas altogether because the thought that I might possibly find a usable, workable resource in the zombie-infested ruins of a record store was so ludicrous as to make hope feel foolish and naive. That finding such a resource was something that might actually happen in video games, sure, but not here in real life. I died hundreds of times in my run. Something else about playing Ungrounded was that I realized that in every situation where I faced a threat, zombies or humans or otherwise, I needed to be perfect to survive. That meant perfect headshots, perfect timing, perfect strategies, perfect poise at all times. If this sounds overly dramatic, picture this. I usually have less than like 7 or 8 bullets at any given time on me, and I'd routinely be stuck facing a group of 7 or 8 enemies at any given time, with virtually no health packs to heal if I screwed up, and I needed to find a way through. So if I made one mistake, it almost always meant certain death. By alerting the herd, you ensure that you die. Now, even if I survived my mistakes, the resource cost of those mistakes made progress from that point feel like a Mount Everest of challenges to overcome. Since I'd stupidly wasted 2 bullets in that encounter, I was going to be at a huge disadvantage in the next encounter because I only had 3 bullets to begin with. So many of my kills were stealth kills because they had to be. I had to conserve ammo. I would skip as many fights as possible. I was acting like a starving wolf. I was never looking for a fight, but I needed to eat. I needed to survive. I needed to kill if I wanted to live. Sometimes the fight wasn't worth it even when I was starving because the odds were so stacked against me. Us gamers were blessed with one of the best video game TV show adaptations in history with HBO's The Last of Us. I thought that world they showed really helped portray how desperate the surviving humans of that world really were. Any naivete, any mistakes, anyone slacking off, it pretty much meant you're going to be killed by any of the dozens of threats facing you every single day. I've never felt really anything close to that experience in any video game I've ever played, and certainly not in real life. In video games, there's always do-overs, always bosses with big flashing red lights that indicate their weak points that spewed out extra ammo for me to kill them with anytime I started running low. Like, I'm not complaining, I love those video game experiences, and again, the video games that have tried to make things more like real life invariably end up being boring and unfair and annoying. In the original Silent Hill 2, there's a cute little cheat you can do where you intentionally enter a boss room with no ammo, and the game's code will literally cause the boss to just die immediately because there's literally no way for the player to progress with no ammo. That's video games. And that's fine. Video games are not real life. But somehow, The Last of Us Part 2 on grounded difficulty didn't feel that way for me. It didn't feel like a regular old video game where I could always count on the game to help me when I, the player, got stuck. While it was still a video game in the sense that it gave me enough, just barely enough resources to progress, bleeding and broken to the next level, playing on that difficulty was the most real-life feeling I've ever felt in a video game ever. It all made sense. Like, of course, I wouldn't just find ammo and health and food and awesome guns lying around in the zombie apocalypse. I'd have to think like a survivor. Where would I hide my most important stashes in a house? Where was the most likely place that I might find a health pack in this world? What were the best uses of the 3 remaining bullets I had? Maybe it wasn't to engage in combat at all. Maybe I could use my precious bullets to draw enemies away from my position so I could sneak past or something. If I had a roll of duct tape, a splash of rubbing alcohol, and an old beer bottle, what was the absolute best, most optimal use of those resources? Did I dare make a Molotov cocktail, hoping it didn't screw up my throw? Did I save it to make a healing kit? What would someone in real life do in this situation? I eventually beat the game. And when I finally did, it was one of the greatest video game accomplishments I'd ever done in my entire life as a gamer. But more importantly, it taught me this. There are absolute joys of playing on hard mode. In video games, and in real life too. I used to be a self-help writer. I wrote books and blogs, and I got millions of people to read my work. I don't really do much of any of that anymore. But I've always believed, back then and still to this day, most people are bad at being present. It's hard enough to feel focused and to be self-aware and present without the constant barrage of interruptions from technology. Companies make more money when you pay attention to them, and many outlets like social media, streaming services, the news, are willing to do pretty much whatever it takes to draw your attention to them. Now, this video isn't about the evils of technology and how annoying advertisements are and notifications on your phone can be. That would be an hours-long video. But when we're talking about playing on hard mode, if you want to succeed in hard mode in any video game, you need to pay attention to everything. The Dark Souls games do a great job representing this. If you take your eyes off the boss for 1 second, you could miss the crucial telegraph motion of one of their 50 arms that signals what type of attack they're going to unleash. If you blink at the wrong time, it could completely throw off your parry timing window. In the case of Elden Ring, that could be as little as 17 frames, less than 1/3 of a second, which is just a hair longer than the average human's reaction time to anything, let alone this. When you're playing on hard mode, if you're not present, you'll lose, pretty much every time. That's because hard mode doesn't care. It doesn't care if you're distracted. It doesn't care if you're tired. It doesn't care if you're worn out from the last 7 straight minutes of laser-focused combat, because there's still 4 more brutal minutes of this boss fight to go. Something else that happens when I play in hard mode, I press fewer buttons. This is something I learned from playing over 1,000 hours in fighting games. When you mash, you die. When you break down each individual action your character can do, you trigger an animation that, if used in combat, typically has a startup phase, an active frames phase, and a cooldown phase. You're more vulnerable during your cooldown phase, unable to do anything other than let the animation play out. In fighting games, the bread and butter of combat involves whiff punishing. which means baiting your opponent to overextend and attack you. You dodge the attack and then punish their whiffed attack with one of your own. On hard mode, the game whiff punishes you. If you mash buttons out of fear or nervousness or even just laziness, the game will punish you hard. When I recently started a New Game Plus file on God of War Ragnarok on the hardest difficulty, one single attack from literally the game's first enemy took out nearly half my health. One hit from the game's weakest enemy. Just like when you're facing a ruthless opponent, ready to punish any mistake you make, these situations force you to be your best, most focused, most poised self. I don't want anyone to think that I'm getting all self-help guru again. I'm trying to say like, even your video games need to help you be productive and gross. Look, maybe I'm just a nutcase, but I just really like needing to be completely and utterly focused on what I'm doing. I love it. It helps me get into flow states. Eventually, I'll get more and more moments where I feel like I'm the lore-accurate version of a protagonist, the one that just utterly destroys and dunks on anything stupid enough to stand in their way. I love playing games on not hard mode, don't get me wrong. Not everything needs to be this big revelatory experience of being focused and being present. But these moments can be really fun. They mirror life too. As a father, one of the most brutal lessons I've learned about parenthood is that your kids don't really care if you're sick or tired or grumpy or resentful at your boss at work or insecure at yourself. They still need you to be their hero every single day. They don't care. There's no days off as a parent. No nights off where when your toddler is screaming at 4 a.m. you just think, someone else will deal with it. No one's coming to save you in real life. And if you want to achieve your goals and be a person you're proud of being, you need to step up, even when you don't want to. Even when you really don't want to. Look, it's hard to be present, but playing on hard mode kind of makes it easier. All right, let me get real for a second here. The other day, a good friend of mine was saying that he was worried about his finances. He was saying that he was worried he might get laid off and he wouldn't know what to do without his income stream. And I hope this doesn't sound insensitive, and I definitely felt for my friend there, but there was just one specific meme that came to my head as he told me that. Maybe you've seen it. It's one where James Franco is like on the gallows and he looks over, he's like, first time? This is because I myself had just been laid off when he told me that. Not once, but twice in the past 11 months. Both times were unexpected and the fallout was rough. The first time, I spent the next 6 months after I got laid off on the job hunt. I had 40 interviews with 20 different companies, none of which ended in a job offer. I managed to find a small contract gig that kind of worked, but despite my boss's constant reassurance that they wanted to keep me on full time and that they were going to renew my contract, make me a full-time employee, I was told that nope, they weren't going to do any of that, and I was back to applying for unemployment checks once again. And look, I say all this not to sound better than my friend or make it seem like I had it worse than him or he should suck it up or something. That's not it at all. I say all this, and I hope you believe me, I mean this with no hint of sarcasm or bitterness at all. I say all this because I realize with much greater gravity that nothing is guaranteed in life. It doesn't matter what type of job I have. There's always a chance I could lose it or get laid off. Life isn't fair, and I'm owed nothing from it. Disaster will kind of always be maybe just one bad day away. It doesn't matter how much money I have or all the security I've got. Things can always go wrong. But the best response to all this isn't to worry about it. What's the point of that? There's an excellent Bible verse found in Matthew 6 that goes, "Can any one of you by worrying add a single hour to your life?" I mean, it's a pretty blunt response to someone who may have been struggling with anxiety for a long time. It might even sound pretty insensitive, but that's kind of the only thing you can really say. Worrying does nothing to help, and wishing things were different is kind of just a waste of your precious energy. All you can control is your response to what happens to you. I like the idea of playing life on hard mode. I don't mean to be insensitive here. I'm a healthy American man and I have more privilege than 99% of the rest of the world. I have nothing to complain about. But like everyone else, I've experienced lots of ups and downs in my career. I started a business that failed spectacularly and eventually left me a nervous wreck as well as tens of thousands of dollars in debt that took my wife and I years to pay off. But something I've learned from all that and all these ups and downs is that the best response is gratitude. Here's why. Look, when you're grateful for your obstacles, and I mean actually really grateful for them, it's like the world kind of stops and just has to do a double take at you. Like, this is someone that is very rare. This someone is special. Someone like that can lead people, inspire hope, and help others who have been unable to see outside their own current circumstances. Which, if you've been screwed over and felt hopeless, you probably know how inspiring it can be to hear a story of someone who went through something much worse than you and made it out even better on the other side. The whole idea of choosing to play life on hard mode is a bit of a misnomer because for most of us, life is pretty much always on hard mode. The feeling of graduating after college, expecting a great job, only to find that no one's willing to hire you, the constant rejection on every dating app you sign up for, those moments when you realize that the people you thought were your friends actually weren't. That's just how life works. It's always hard. But you can learn so much more this way. And more importantly, you can help others who are struggling with the same things through your own identity of hope, self-assurance, and resilience. See, the thing about resilience is that it's really only made when things are tough. And if you want to be a more resilient person, which everyone should want this in the state of our world, it's logical that you would then place yourself in positions to be forced to grow intentionally. That's why putting yourself out there is so important. Trying new things that might end up failing, asking that person out on a date, going up to strangers playing basketball at a park and asking if you can play too, starting a business in a crowded, competitive space. All this means you're choosing to play on hard mode. But hard mode makes you stronger. It's like wearing a weighted vest while running a marathon. Then you'll soon reach a point where other people around you are struggling just as much as you, yet they aren't wearing a weighted vest. Well, you can take yours off and finish the race in ways other people can't even understand. Going back to my friend, a lot of my friends have financial insecurity. Maybe you do too. It doesn't matter who I talk to, it just seems like everyone's worried about buying a house or the rising cost of groceries, being stuck in an underpaid job just because they can't find anything else. I've been there. Many times. I've been broke, fired, laid off, screwed over, and left to figure out everything all by myself. At those times, I needed help, and I needed someone to show me that there was a way out, that it was possible to change things. You can be that person when you choose to play life on hard mode. Thanks for watching. And if you want to watch more videos like this, be sure to click that subscribe button.